and welcome back to the Cello Corner. Today we're going to talk about strings and how to choose them. So basically I have three different parameters that we're going to talk about today, which are the material, the gauge, and the tension. And all of these three parameters will influence your choice into the string. Let's start with the materials. So you have two different categories. You have the materials for the core, and then you have the materials made for the outer layer, which is like a wire around the strings. That's why when you look at your string closer, then you can see a lot of fine lines. That's the outer layer. So for the core, we started using strings that were made from gut a few centuries back. So sheep intestine, that is what was used mostly before. And gut strings have a lower tension and are a little harder to tune, so it requires a little more finesse playing them, so that's why they're not recommended for beginner players. Moving on to the 20th century, that's when the violinist started to use steel, especially for the E string, and after that it kind of was common use to use steel for the other strings as well, and for the instruments like viola and cello. So the steel core strings is very brilliant, very focused, and that's why a lot of players used it after the gut string, because it was very contrasting. And then in the last 40 years, the brands and companies that make strings have worked onto experimenting with synthetic core. So basically using synthetic material to do the core, and then sometimes do a bunch of them together to create like a composite core, so it would be only one material inside. I think the first one was created by the Thomas Dickenfeld company using purlin, which is a type of nylon. And since then they've been working with different material to experiment to get different texture, different response, different tone, different warmth or darker colors into the sound of the instruments. So the synthetic strings are much more stable than the gut strings, and they have a very focused tone. For the material of the outer layer, what was used before for the gut string was either silver or copper. And so for the steel string, you would just have a mix of different metal that were used, either aluminum, nickel, gold, of course steel, tungsten as well, which is a more recent one, and titanium, which is really good for allergies, because sometimes instrumentalists have allergies to some part of the instruments, whether it's the varnish, whether it's the metal used like on the chin rest for violinists, or strings for different players. So if you have reaction with your hands, then it's good to use the titanium wired strings. And so all of the density of these metal, so the thickness of it and the number of time that you have to wrap it around the string, that will influence our second parameter, which is the gauge, and that is basically the thickness of the string. So gauge is often mistook for the tension. No, it's just basically the density of the metal used for the outer layer that play a big part into how thick is the string gonna be. And a thinner string compared to a thicker string will react differently and give different response. So for example, tungsten, which is the newer material that I was talking about earlier, is twice as dense as silver, so you will need less of it if you're wiring the string with that metal. So the brand and companies use three different settings to help the buyers kind of differentiate between all of the strings. For the gauge, you have light, medium, and thick. So basically a thinner string will be more responsive, it has a lower tension and project a little bit less, but a thicker string will answer a little less promptly. Our last parameter, which is tension, is actually measured in weight, and it is basically the weight it requires to reach a certain pitch. So all of those settings are what differentiate different brands and companies, because their setting might be different, but you can find that information on the string package more often than not. How long the string will be to reach the tension for a certain pitch. Let's say they tune all of their cello, they use the 440, then how much weight it's going to be used for that tension. So that's all of the indications that are written in the package. So that tension may vary because of the different sizes of the instrument. Like for the specific company, Thomas Dickenfeld, I know they use the tension on the A pitch is used at 440, and then for the full length it's 70 centimeters, but then use a 3/4, and then that tension will be used at 65 centimeters, and then the weight associated with that will then vary. So the tension also have 3 different settings that set them apart, like light, medium, and heavy. And some different material string, like gut string, will have a lower tension, like I previously said, and steel strings or other synthetic strings will have a higher tension. The tension is the pliability underneath the fingertips, so the easiness of going down to the fingerboard and back, basically. So a lower tension is easier on the finger. That's why we say it's more responsive, because it's easier to actionate under your finger. So when you experiment with different type of strings and different type of tension and gauge, it's good to start with medium in both categories, so your instrument has time to adapt, so you can hear the real sound of the strings, and also you have a way to differentiate what is light or what is heavy or thick. So with all of this information, basically the brands and the string companies have done experiments to find perfect sounds or different sound qualities for all of the different type of players that there are out there. And all of those strings are made with the perfect idea of catering to your needs. So when you're a beginner, you need something that will project well and that is easy under the finger, that will respond very quickly. You don't need to have a very wide variety of colors, of tone, because you're still getting used to your board and you're not going to be able to reach those yet anyway. So don't go necessarily for the more expensive string. It's not going to make you play better necessarily. Go for the cheaper ones that will make you play more easily, so then you can advance faster, and then go for intermediate strings and then more advanced strings. So the most important thing is to think about the sound that you want and then go for those characteristics. So I hope that you learned a lot about strings and what to be looking out for. Basically, I just say have an idea of the sound you want and the qualities you're looking for, and then try to make some research about different brands and different names. Think about your budget and think about your level as a player, and with all of those information, then it won't be as intimidating to be buying a new set of string at the luthier, because sometimes it just suggests a few brands but you don't know which one are the best. Why do they suggest those ones specifically for you and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed, and good luck with all of this new information in your research of strings. Goodbye, have a good one.